Hello friends, welcome back. Today I am here to discuss a topic related to educational planning. In our last class, we discussed about the social demand approach in educational planning. Friends, you know there are lots of approaches in educational planning which we already stated in our last class, that social justice approach, social demand approach, manpower planning approach, then cost of effect approach or rate of return approach. So among all these approach, today we shall discuss the manpower requirement approach, which is also known as the human resource development approach. In today's class, we shall cover the background, the concept of this approach, the aims of this approach, the various aspects of human resource development approach, along with its advantages and disadvantages. So here, first of all, let us know the background of human resource development approach. So we have to go back to the period of 1960 to 1970, when this manpower requirement approach was highly used among the newly independent South African countries. When these countries got independence from the European dominance, then the people, the political planner, the educational planner of these newly independent South African countries started to develop their indigenous manpower, started to think about the development of their indigenous manpower to develop their own economies. Because without developing each and every human being, without converting each and every human being into the form of resource, total development of a country is not possible. And it was known to those South African countries also, and that is why this approach was widely used by those countries. And it was Leonard Nadler. We have to remember the name of Nadler, who wrote a book in the year 1970, and name of the book was Developing Human Resources. He was from George Washington University, and because of his contribution, because of his thoughts, ideas, and innovations in the field of human resource development, he is also called as the father of this manpower requirement approach. So Nadler is the father of manpower requirement approach. Now, human resource development through education initiates and influences senses in order to remain relevant and productive in various stages of development. As the process of development gains momentum, new problems always emerge, demanding new skills and knowledge. You all know that only education is the dynamic force. So only education is the main instrument which allows for senses needed to face the complexity of development of this new skill and knowledge. So it constitutes the most universally recognized remedy for increasing the capabilities of human resources. The lots of challenges, the hurdles, the difficulties when stress the human being, then with the help of education only, those complexities of this new development, new innovations can be tackled by human being. So in discussing the concept of human resource development, we have to ensure that we are to discuss that to ensure an organization which develops a learning culture, which develops a learning strategy to achieve its mission and goals, human resource development approaches must. It is the duty of educational management people, that every employee or every member of an organization should be well equipped with all kinds of learning facilities, with all kinds of new innovations to learn, so that they can contribute to achieve the common goals, common purpose of the organization. Harbison, in the year 1973, he said that human resource development is the process of building the knowledge, skills, the working ability and the innate capacities of all people in a society. So every man or every human being should be developed or should be converted into a power. That is why it is called as manpower approach. So Harbison also argued in favor of this approach, and he said that this approach is nothing but a simple process of building the knowledge, building the skills, developing the skills, working ability, and the innate capabilities of all people in a society so that they can contribute to a country's economic growth. And therefore, the main objectives of human resource development must be to build knowledge and skill among the people, and secondly, to provide employment opportunities for unutilized and for underutilized manpower. Two things are said here. For those people who are unutilized, they have capacity but they are unutilized, and for those people who are underutilized, they are also they are also possessing full of capabilities, but only a few percent is only utilized by the society. So these objectives clearly, this concept clearly says that education should education should be closely linked with the employment sector. That means education should directly or indirectly contribute to the different sectors of a country, and it should contribute, it should produce as many as educated youths or trained manpower of different categories such as doctors, engineers, teachers, graduates, postgraduates, etc., etc., so that uh, there should not be any no lack of no dearth of required manpower in a country's economic development. So based on this human resource development approach, education systems are designed to respond to the quantity of manpower and skills required by the each sector of the country's economy. So obviously there is a close connection between education and economic development of a country, and economy of a country determines the quality of education, and education contributes directly to the economic growth of the country. So in order to forecast the manpower needs of the country or job sector of a country, manpower requirement approach analysis is must. It emphasizes that education should be closely linked with the subsector. And we have to say that this approach also supports vocationalization of education. This approach supports multi-purpose educational courses, trade courses, and selective higher education, so that rapid economic development is possible. And the main assumption behind this approach is that it stresses output from the educational system to meet the manpower needs of different job sectors at some future date of a country. That means at maybe a particular year may be fixed by the country. That means within 2025, what are the requirements of a country in the field of medical science? What are the manpower requirement in the field of engineering? What are the requirement in the field of industrial? All those things should be, all those requirements should be clearly mentioned, clearly identified. That means job sector should be clearly analyzed by the planner, educational planner. And it should produce, that means education system should produce as many educated and trained manpowers of different categories such as doctors, engineers. I have already said doctors, engineers, graduate, postgraduate, etc., as required by the country for its various services. So obviously it is a long-term perspective. That means this approach emphasizes a long-term perspective and a thorough study of the occupational census, occupational scenario, and the technological progress, as well as the rise in educational standard. And it is known to all that this process will definitely be a long-term process, because the process of adjustment between education and the search for manpower requirements in various subsectors, it definitely takes time. Within a day or within 2-3 days or within a very short period of time it cannot be calculated what are the requirements in different job sectors. Now the aspects of human resource development approach. Here mainly three aspects we have to know. There are main three aspects of human resource development or manpower requirement approach. First aspect is helping hand attitude and motivating capacity, motivating attitude of the management people. The organizational structure and climate, human resource development climate, human resource development knowledge, and skills of managers, and resource planning recruitment, selection, etc. The enabling factors which contribute directly to the development of attitude of helping and motivating the institutional members. Second aspect of this approach is that resources are acquired, molded, and developed. That means all human beings are to be developed by well-equipped strategies by the various means. So this second aspect deals with techniques or methods and means to acquire, develop, and shape up the various human resources. These techniques include performance appraisal, potential appraisal, career planning and development, training, management development, social and cultural programs, workers' participation in management and quality circles. All these are various techniques with the help of which the human being of an institution, of a country, of a society can be converted to the human resource. And the third aspect is that it includes the outcomes, the contribution of the human resource development process to the goals of the organization, it contributes to the group, it contributes to the individual as well as to the society. That means contributions are always organizational contributions. If a people contributes to its organization, then also these contributions will also be the help to his personal development, to his individual development and social contributions. And the aims of manpower approach, there are three aims are discussed here. First aim of manpower approach is that to estimate the required number of graduates by education system at different levels in the country's economy. Second aim is to estimate the number of teachers at different levels and types of education. Third is to assess the existing curriculum and give recommendations for change. That means first of all is to estimate how many graduates are required in a particular economy, in a particular sector. Second aim is to estimate the number of teachers in that particular sector to teach, to train up the inputs. And the third is to assess the existing curriculum, that is it well, is it okay, or is there any necessity to upgrade that curriculum? These are to be assessed. So these are the three main aims of this manpower requirement approach. Now we have to know the stages of manpower approach also. Friends, let us discuss the stages in manpower approach. But before discussing the various stages, first of all, the educational planner have to answer a few questions. So before proceeding step by step in manpower requirement approach, before discussing the steps, it is the duty of the educational planner to answer the questions. First one is, how many jobs will be vacant in the economy by the end of the target year? That means suppose our target year is 2025. Our target year is 2025. Then it is the duty of the educational planner to deal with the question, how many jobs will be vacant in the whole economic area of India in that 2025. So this is the first question. Second question is, what kind of skills will be acquired in the economy by the end of the target year? That means today's skills, which we are thinking that we are very skilled in this area, in that area, but after 5 years or after 10 years, those skills may be irrelevant. So educational planner must think advance. They have to think that what kind of skills will be required in the economy by the end of the target year. That means in 2025 or maybe in 2030, what kind of skills will be helpful to develop the country's economy. And another question which is also relevant for the educational planner is that how many students are required in the education system in order to produce the required number of human resources to fill up the vacancies available by the end of the target year. So these questions, when we think about these questions, it automatically gives rise certain steps, and these steps are first step of manpower requirement approach is that sector-wise list of the number of workers, sector-wise list the education system, sector-wise educational courses, and sector-wise listing the occupational class for the base year. Second step is projection about the size of total labor force required by the end of the target year. Next step is forecast total employment per sector or industry. Then determine the size of the labor force required in each sector within the set period. In the fourth step, allocation of employment by industry among the different categories of occupations such as engineering, agriculture, teaching, nursing, legal profession, medical science. So different categories of economic development, different categories of occupations are there in a country. So all those employment must be allocated. Although in all those employment areas, resource allocation must be according to their need, according to their demand. Next, determine the type of education in terms of curriculum, content, and structure required to develop the desired manpower. Then estimating the future labor supply by type of education, which involves analysis of current labor supply and demand in future in order to use the difference to project future labor force. Then compute the required change in annual outflow. That means annually how much of outputs have produced by a particular sector, by a particular state. Then internally and externally through retirements. This also necessary to take into account the retirement quantity, then possible occupational mobility and deaths. Then determine size of any migrant labor groups and their origin. And finally, to compute the required enrollments in each type of education to ensure a balance of inputs and outflow. Outflow means outputs of the manpower annually to guard against shortfalls and surpluses in manpower supply. So these are the steps. Now there are some merits and demerits also in this manpower planning approach. Like the other approaches, this approach has certain merits. That means first point of advantage is that manpower could usefully call attention to extreme gaps and imbalances in the education output pattern that need remedy. This does not need elaborate statistical studies, just estimation is necessary on a particular area. Next advantage is it gives educators useful guidance on how roughly educational qualifications of the labor force ought to be developed in the future. That is the relative proportion of people who would have primary education, secondary education, and various amount of post-secondary training. And the another advantage is that the unemployment and underemployment, which may result from some overemphasis on manpower approach, may become a challenge to move towards the right kind of education, which may be development oriented and thereby creating its own job is also advantage. And these advantages are a detailed projection of the demand for human resources is difficult due to the uncertainty or due to the uncertainty of productivity of trends. It gives educational planner a limited guidance in the sense that it does not tell what can be actually achieved in every level of education. Suppose in primary education, in secondary education, what to do, what to be achieved, it is not clearly said. The third one is that this approach is nothing about primary education, since you know that primary education is not considered to be work connected. So this approach has nothing connection with the development of primary education. So with these merits and demerits, I'd like to conclude my class. Thank you. And if you have any query, any difficulty, please drop your query, drop your problem in my mailbox. My mail ID is mallika kalita1980 @gmail.com. Thank you all.